Hello and welcome back to the Matrix Green Pill podcast. I'm your host, Hilmarie Hutchison, and today's guest brings science, sustainability, and soul into one incredibly inspiring journey. Georgina Pereira is the manager of species survival at Expo City Dubai, where she's helping lead the world's first IUCN Center for Species Survival for fungi. Georgia recently took the TED stage to share her powerful transition from law to mushrooms and how fungi taught her about resilience, purpose, and navigating life with ADHD. Georgina, welcome and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me over, Hilmarie. I'm so excited.
I'm excited to hear about this change you did in your life and where it's taking you. Let's start from the beginning. You were born in India, but you're actually a Dubai kid, having grown up in the city. Tell us a little bit about your background and how that shaped your worldview and your career journey.
I was born in Sharjah, actually, little old town in Sharjah, right here in the UAE. But yeah, you're right. I spent a few years in India, and then I've been in Dubai pretty much all my life. And I think growing up in Dubai really sort of teaches you two things. One is resiliency, and then two is just adaptability. I often forget how young the country is. Growing up here, you see buildings come up overnight. You see mindsets changed overnight. You see people working on new projects all the time. And so for me, while what I did for a very long time was sort of the checkbox career, I think I just loved being able to see how fast UAE was growing, how everybody was adapting in Dubai. And so it gave me the opportunity to also sort of think outside the box when it came to my career and my profession.
I like how you say that you had to learn resiliency and adaptability. And you're right, Dubai is constantly changing. You have to be ready to make those changes as well. You've spoken openly about navigating ADHD. How has that experience influenced your work and your creativity?
I think ADHD is such a funny thing because all my life as a child, I would be called super lazy for multiple different tasks. I wasn't paying enough attention in class. It was because I was lazy. I scored really low marks in one of my exams, and it was because I was too lazy to study. But I realized very quickly that for the things that I did find passionate and like sort of curiosity around, I just wanted to do more. And so I think ADHD sort of really helped me figure out what it was that I prioritized as being important for me, as opposed to for the people around me, for society around me. And it really helped me channel all of the passion that I had into one niche subject. At work, I call it hyper focusing quite often. You'll see me hunched over my desk. You'll see me with my earphones on, just typing away, and I will lose track of time. I tend to finish my work days at 5 p.m., but a lot of the time, up until 8, 9 p.m. sometimes, accidentally, you'll see me still typing away. And that's because ADHD has this wonderful, wonderful habit of getting you to hyper focus on the things you're really passionate about. And so when it comes to fungi and mushrooms and the work that I do now, it's so specific and it's so niche, but it really, really gets me in the zone to be able to talk about these things with sort of full authority, but also find new ways to be able to discuss these things. And so that's so important to me. But that really helps me channel my energy better.
Yes, that being so hyper focused when you are interested in something really helps you to be that much more productive and get that much more done because you simply love it. Now, there's so many questions I want to ask, but I want to start off with your TED Talk. Your recent TED Talk was incredibly personal and powerful. How did you get to do a TED Talk, and what was it like sharing your story on such a big stage?
Honestly one of the highlights of my life. But this TED Talk that was organized by one of the GEM schools, yeah, GEMs are in Indian, was focusing on sort of unprecedented careers, but also for people who have made like a massive switch up in their lives and to talk about what got them inspired to do that. And for me, for the longest time, I was training to be a lawyer and I was practicing in India. And so the legal career and the legal pathway was what I had my eyes set on for years, up until a little below 10 years ago. When COVID came around and it sort of slowed things down for me, I started to look at what mattered the most to me. And I started to really find biodiversity as my calling as a child. It was always something that I was drawn to, but not necessarily as a career. And so it was sort of an overnight decision that just made me stop.
Georgina, I want to ask a question about that.
Yes.
During your TED Talk, you talk about that switch you made in your life. I love in your TED Talk, you talk about your love of learning, also your love of speaking. And this is what led you to decide being in law would be the perfect place for you because you could do a lot of talking. So then you made the switch from law to fungi. Certainly not a typical path, either of those. So, what sparked your fascination with mushrooms and biodiversity? What made the change for you? Let's hear a bit about that.
So growing up, I was surrounded by mushrooms and by incredible biodiversity because I spent the first, I think, 9, 10 years of my life in India with my grandmother. And so I've always had a fascination for it. I've always thought they were incredibly weird, much like I was sort of outcast from the biodiversity world, much like I was in school. And so I was always keen to learn more. It was never really presented to me as an opportunity for a career or a professional pathway. But you're right in that I did love talking and I loved debating and I loved the stage. And so I just wanted to take all of that to court and be able to litigate. And so law was, for the longest time, the absolute perfect pathway for me. It made perfect sense. I loved my time in law school and learning more about it. But I did find myself with every passing year just becoming more and more tired. I found myself being drained with the work that I was doing to a point where it no longer felt gratifying. And so by the time COVID came around, I sort of paused, looked back on what I thought my priorities were, and I realized that the world around me was still thriving, but it just wasn't the people anymore because we were all stuck at home, but it was nature. And so I was like, we need to figure out a way to keep this going and to save this. I've always been one for the underdogs, and fungi really are the underdogs of the biodiversity and the conservation field. And so it was no surprise when I chose to go back to what I enjoyed in my childhood, which was just being around mushrooms, being around natural landscapes and figuring out how to conserve them and make them protected areas, really.
Yes, I also like how you said in your tech talk that you intentionally slowed down to enjoy nature. And in that process, again, discovered mushrooms and looking at their growth and how beautiful they were. And I like that it was very intentional for you to say, what I'm doing now is not working for me, and then finding a path that resonated with who you are. You're now leading species survival efforts for fungi at Expo City. What exactly does that role involve?
So now that we are finally able to talk about fungi and look at it as an important kingdom all around the world, mycologists, who are the people who study fungi, like myself, and we're looking at how we can involve mycology or fungi in the conservation world. So globally, if we look at how much funding goes towards different conservation projects, less than 0.2% in the last 25 years have actually been channeled towards fungi. And so there's a massive gap. And so through the center, the IUCN SSC Center for Species Survival Fungi at Terra Expo City Dubai, we are looking at how we can slowly start to bridge that gap by getting more data involved. So even when we look at and even think of mushrooms, we tend to think of them in like really swampy tropical areas, but they grow even in our deserts out here in our backyards in the UAE. And so we're looking at how we can map that diversity better, how we can understand what we say as macrofungal, so the mushrooms we can see, the mushroom diversity of the UAE and the Middle Eastern region. And then we're looking at how we can convert that into actual conservation action for the kingdom as a whole.
Amazing work that you're doing, and something that is so overlooked. It's not something people sort of notice all the time around them. And as you say, there's so much diversity. You call it a missing kingdom. What is something surprising or mind blowing that you've learned about mushrooms that most people don't know?
You know what? We tend to think of fungi as just mushrooms, but really, fungi are in everything. Right now, we have found fungi that helps break down and eat plastic. Think of what that could do for our landfills, what that research could potentially do for soil and for the earth. We call it mycoremediation, but we have found fungi that are holding contaminated soils, but trying to absorb the heavy metals from them. So, to give us soil back that we can use for food, for example. We're learning how fungi and its mycelium can be used to revolutionize the fashion industry. We're looking at it as leather. So there are just so many aspects of fungi that we tend to forget as just beyond mushrooms. And so I think the most mind blowing thing that I figured out is that everything I look at, everything around me, is somehow connected back to fungi.
That is quite a breakthrough if you could find something that can eat plastics, something that can clean the soil and make it usable for humans again. That is absolutely incredible. And then also for fashion. In what way? You spoke of leather. Are you creating the leather from the mushrooms or from the fungi?
So the mushrooms is actually the fruit of the fungi, right? So If we think about it in terms of a plant starts its life as a seed, it grows its roots, eventually produces a sapling, a big tree if it's a fruit tree, and then it gives us that fruit that we can then eat, which has the seeds again. But for a mushroom, it starts as a spore, and the spore then creates what we call the mycelial network. And this mycelium is sort of like thin, hair-like structures that will form dense networks or dense mats under the ground. And we have now figured out that if we take this mycelium out, isolate it, and we treat it almost like it's textile, we are then able to use it almost like an ethical vegan leather. And so for bags and for shoes and for belts that we would normally use leather, fashion designers from around the world are working with mycologists to see how mycelium can be a vegan and ethical alternative.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. Such exciting work, such important work. I can hear the passion in your voice when you speak about it. This is something that's truly something that you love to do. Definitely, you found your place where law wasn't doing that for you, there's no doubt. As a woman in science and sustainability, what advice would you give to young girls curious about STEM careers?
This is arguably my favorite question. For the longest time, and I still do, there are points of my life where imposter syndrome is very, very real for me. And particularly even more so in STEM. My poorest subjects in school were actually mathematics and physics and a bit of chemistry. And so I really, really struggled with understanding how STEM could be a part of what I do. But then I very quickly realized that if you're truly, truly passionate about something, the way you find those answers are not necessarily in what people might seem as mainstream ways to be able to find answers. And so now, really, for me, it's just understanding that you can channel that passion in whatever way you'd like, figure out creative solutions for problems that might currently exist. But as long as you are able to hold on to that passion and sort of just keep going, STEM is really just like anything else for you, as long as you are still passionate and curious about what you're doing. So, my biggest advice would be to never, never think that it might not be something that's not your cup of tea just because one of the subjects aren't necessarily the best for you. But if you keep trying to tinker with it, keep trying to play with it, I think you'll find a solution that will most likely revolutionize an industry or change the world for the better that most other people might not have thought of. So, I would say keep trotting along, keep trotting along. And if it doesn't quite work for you, figure out a way to make it work, but stay passionate about it while you do it.
I think that's excellent advice. So we shouldn't, or girls shouldn't look and think, well, I'm not good at certain subjects, that's sort of typical STEM subjects. So I'm now not going to even try because, as you say, if you're passionate enough about it, it's going to come. And I also love in your story how you had taken one path and decided this was not the path for me, and then readjusted yourself and then got into a path where you could feel the passion and something you absolutely love to do. What are some of the challenges and opportunities of building the IUCN's first fungi focused center right here in Dubai?
With the center and the sort of work that we're doing, I think the biggest challenge right now is really being able to, one, prove that this is a kingdom that needs to be conserved and saved, right? We have so many projects that are currently ongoing worldwide talking about why we need to save fauna, which are the animals, and flora, the plants. And so, really proving the case for why fungi needs to also be saved and conserved is pretty high on my priority list. But how do we do that is also one of the biggest challenges because we need to be able to have data to say that this needs to be protected and saved. And right now, we don't have a lot of data. So one of the biggest challenges really is here in the UAE is trying to start to build this database from scratch, trying to now understand what exists around us and eventually being able to integrate that into policy. But that being able to integrate it into policy is really the biggest opportunity, right? It's being able to, for the first time, recognize the whole kingdom and understand how we can better take care of our soil, how it helps our native plants in the country maybe survive, how it is the food source for a lot of different native fauna that are in the country. So the opportunity is massive because it really sort of intertwines so nicely with all of these other little buckets of conservation and biodiversity. And so it's figuring out what currently exists as being the biggest challenge, but then sort of letting that fruit and letting that mycelium spread into the other industries and the other facets of conservation that presents itself as the biggest opportunity here.
For clarity for our audience, what is the difference between fungi and fungi?
Absolutely the same. It really is a matter of like tomato, tomato, potato, potato. Because based on where you are from around the world, you will tend to say differently. And I tend to do this, and I've seen myself do this when I'm around Americans in a room. You'll hear me say fungi just because they relate to it easier. When I'm with a lot of the Europeans, we say fungi or fungi. A lot of Southeast Asia, the Middle East, we tend to say fungi. And so really, it's just a matter of where you are in the world and where you were brought up, but they all refer to the exact same kingdom of species.
What's next for you? Are there any upcoming projects or personal missions that you're excited about?
Upcoming projects, we've got a few different projects that are lined up for the center right now. The biggest one, arguably, is the UAE, establishing the UAE's first national macrofungal checklist. So it is the process of creating an official checklist of what macrofungal or mushroom diversity exists around us. And so if anybody else wants to then study or find research questions around fungi in the UAE, this acts as an established checklist of what exists around us. Why I'm super excited about it is because aside from all of the different centers around the UAE that we're working with, aside from all of the science that goes into it, we are also really, really big on community engagement. And so we are mobilizing the public. If you're a resident in Dubai, if you're a citizen of the UAE, and you start to see mushrooms elsewhere, take a picture of it, and send it back to us. So we use an app called iNaturalist. And if you go into iNaturalist and look up for the project UAE's fungi, you'll be able to see, I think right now we're at about 300 observations. So what this means is the public around the UAE, as and when they spot a fungal species, take a picture of it, and then they upload it onto this app. And on the back end, I am able to see what sort of diversity exists. Where is it being found? And I'm able to study it further. Maybe go pick up a sample, come and culture it in the office so that we can try and understand what specimen that is. We call that citizen science, where we enable just the everyday citizens to also be scientists in what they do for biodiversity and for work. And so we're really mobilizing the public. So get onto the app, find iNaturalist. If you find a mushroom around you when you're going on your walk or you're at work or you're at school, get a picture and put it up there. And then we'll have a look at it. And that's how you'll be able to contribute directly to the project as well.
I love that, to get the community involved, and it's helping you to build that database. And there are so many people who love going into the desert, maybe go on walks, find different nooks and crannies in the UAE, and then that's also helping you to then map where things are and what's growing in the community. That's brilliant. I love it. Well, you've done an amazing job. You are doing an amazing job. It's something so different. We have enough lawyers. We needed more people like you to do what you're doing. So I love that you've taken this path and so intentional about what it is that you're doing. Now we've come to the segment of our show where I will ask you some rapid fire questions, our version of a game show. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What's your favorite fungi fact?
Is that we have only named 150,000 species, but we think there might be up to 3 million different species. So if you get into the field and you start to go and look out for fungi and start to record them, chances are you'll find a brand new species that you then get to name.
What is one thing that mushrooms taught you about life?
Oh, that it's just perfectly all right to be a little bit weird, to be in your own space, and to thrive just when you need to. For the longest part of a fungi's lifespan, it spends it underground, quiet as the mycelial network. Just when it's the right time, they will fruit as a mushroom, fulfill their purpose, and then disappear sometimes in less than 3 days. And so you can be a little bit odd, you can be a little bit weird, but you'll still find your path and you'll still find people who care for you and want to support you in what you do.
I love that. And you've shown that in your own life as well. Coffee, chai, or mushroom tea?
I am a big fan of chai. You can take me out of India, but it's hard to take the India out of me. And so, big fan of chai. But right now, there's mushroom chai that's also making its way. So, maybe that's one to look out for.
Sounds good. Your go to book or podcast for creative inspiration?
I am a big fan of just fun facts and fun things to know and then weaving them into storytelling. And so my favorite podcast is probably No Such Thing as a Fish, just fun facts all day, every day. My favorite book, I tend to go back to children's books, and there's one called The Humongous Fungus, and it makes me feel super small because it talks about the biggest organism being a fungal organism on Earth, but also just how important and vital they are.
What does resilience mean to you?
Just being okay with change. I think sometimes resiliency is not performing your best, but it is under change and under pressure, still figuring out how to thrive and succeed.
Who is your role model?
It has and has always been Dr. Jane Goodall. I spoke about her very fondly in my TED Talk as well, and I had the honor of being able to interview her a couple of times. But she had told me this in person, but she was the same age when she went to Gombe as I was when I got really into mycology. And so she's a big part of what I do.
I love that. And so sad with her passing. She reached a good age of 91, but so sad of her passing earlier this month. But what an amazing opportunity to get to meet her in person. That's fantastic.
Absolutely. And what a legacy she's left behind for us to follow and really show up for.
Absolutely. What is one thing that you do every day, no matter how busy you get?
At least spend a minimum of 10 minutes outside with nature, whether that's in the middle of work, just a quick walk around where I work, whether that is at the end of the day, stop by the desert, whether it's in the morning, try and get a swim at the beach. I do at least a minimum of 10 minutes in nature every day.
Excellent. That's so healthy. That's so good for you. Fantastic. Well, thank you for playing along. That was easy enough. Now, I would like to ask you our signature green pill question. What was your green pill moment, the action or event that was the turning point for you or your career?
My biggest sort of memory of what made me change and switch careers, I will never forget. There's a picture of it, but it's a picture of me in the corner of law school, asleep on the ground, just because I was so, I wouldn't even say overworked, but I was so tired and could no longer find purpose in the things that were once purposeful to me. And I think being in that moment sort of reminded me that all of the things that I'd worked up for until then, to be able to have a career that was gratifying, to be able to define a career as something being successful, all of these things to me in that moment didn't matter. I was longing. I realized that I was longing for what I used to love as a child, which was to just go out, play in the rain, roll in some mud, just so I could feel human again. And so, really, when COVID came around and I was forced to do that, you mentioned me being intentional, and it's because I was forced to do that. I think that was my slowing down and my green pill moment. It's that there's so much that existed outside of the confines of the law school that I was in that I was beginning to forget and beginning to feel less connected to. And the minute I took myself out and I intentionally slowed down and I put myself in that environment that I found myself to thrive in earlier, it's almost like it brought me back to life. It's like I was a plant and I was given a little bit of water and a bit of sunlight and I just came back to life again. And so that's probably the one moment that I keep going back to when I think of what my purpose is now.
It's amazing that you were able to slow down, to reflect in that moment that this wasn't what you wanted anymore. And then, as you mentioned, as we spoke about, you being intentional about making that change. Because so many people never have that moment. They're in a place, they're doing something they absolutely hate doing. They haven't found their purpose, but they just plod along because that's all they know. They don't get that opportunity to make that switch. And for you, you recognized that moment that you needed to do something different, and then you made that change, which is lovely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your journey with us. You're doing some really fascinating, exciting work, something that's going to make a difference because of the things that you're discovering. I love that. So I really enjoyed this conversation with you today. Your story is proof that sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to the most meaningful impact. From biodiversity to bioinnovation, you're not just changing the narrative, you're expanding it. Before you wrap up, where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about the fungi work happening at Expo City?
So if you haven't been to Terra, definitely come by, stop. We'll show you around and then we'll show you some of the work that we do. But also look out for our website. We are Visit Terra. So look out for Terra Expo City Dubai. All of our social media handles on Instagram and on LinkedIn is also Visit Terra. I'm Georgina Pereira on LinkedIn and on Instagram. I put up a lot of the work that I do around some of our UAE fungal species, like the desert truffles, one of my favorites. So definitely find me as well. And yeah, if you're ever keen, drop me a message, drop me an email, or just come by to Terra and find me. You know where I work. And then I'll be happy to show you some of the stuff that we do.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Matrix Green Pill podcast. If Georgie's journey inspired you, be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. We'd love your support. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected to nature, and never underestimate the power of mushrooms.
If you enjoy our conversations, please like and subscribe. See you next Wednesday.